This is my leader.
There you go.
And I'm ambitious for him.
Yeah, good on you. Thanks, ScoMo.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. I will not.
Did he knock back the crystal? I don't think so.
So we have a very clear plan for jobs and growth.
Hello everyone, we're on the ground floor, very first episode of Jobs and Growth. Now, Patrick will be joining us in a moment, but just before that, we would just like to take a moment to introduce this podcast, what our goals are, what we're about. I'm Georges Angel and
I'm Lockie Elliott.
And together we are going to bring our minds, our energy and our focus.
No, look, we're very excited to give a young person's view on jobs and growth, our comments on politics and the wider macro economy, and excited to have you all listening.
Yeah, no, it's important to get our thoughts on the record and kind of grow this platform to something huge.
Absolutely. I mean, I think in the podcast game in Australia, there's a lot of room to compete with your Mark Borrises, your Sam Frickers.
Yeah. Titans of the industry.
Yeah.
Hamish and Andy.
Yep.
Shameless. I like Shameless.
Sure.
You listen to Shameless
I
at
don't
all?
know what Shameless is.
It's a bit of news, celebrity drama.
Good. Well, with that said, Georges, introduce yourself to the podcast, please.
Yeah, so my name's Georges. Lockie goes around telling people I'm smart. Do you still do that or?
Yeah, absolutely. You're one of the brightest men out there.
Well, thank you. You know, I'm Georges and I kind of just float around and smell like seaweed.
Like seaweed.
Yeah, no. What about yourself, Lockie?
No, I'm Lockie. A bit like a motion light. I only do work when people are around.
And what are you doing when no one's watching?
Not much, just reading, studying for the next podcast.
Yes, We've put a lot of work into this. We've had a lot of guests that we've tried to book, and they were afraid to come on. What were they afraid of? They were afraid of greatness, afraid of success.
They were afraid to answer the hard-hitting questions that everyone wants to know.
Yeah, and to have these conversations. So
too many cowards.
Yeah, too many cowards. Yeah. Well, and they're not even scared of anything. Like to be scared of greatness is probably the biggest flaw.
It is to be scared of life.
So yeah. So you know who you are. I'm not going to name you. You know who you are, but do better. And look, we're not barring you from future episodes, but just a warning.
You're not getting on you're never going to have the opportunity to get on another milestone episode. You're not getting on the first episode, clearly.
Yeah.
You're not getting on the 10th. You're not getting on the 25th, the 50th, the 100th.
You forgot the 15th. The 15th is pretty important.
You reckon?
Yeah.
What's important about the 15th?
And 22 is also important.
Is that some
bit of numerology for you?
Speaking about numerology, Georges, what is your numerology?
My life path?
Yeah.
9.
And what does 9 represent?
9's a bit of a out there one. It's a bit of a wild card, I'm pretty sure. It's, yeah.
So 9 signifies completion. The end of a life cycle and the beginning of a new one. It's a culmination of learning and experience. So that tells me that your life is going to be full of learning, reading new books, watching new films.
I think Steve Jobs, someone who I look up to, he said there's thinkers and doers. And if you got both, you've really got something good. I think I'm just a thinker. I'm not much of a doer. So it's so yeah, I don't know. That's me.
At what age did you really come into and begin to appreciate Steve Jobs? Obviously, a great titan of industry.
I'd say around year 4, grade 5.
Sure. How old were you? What year was that?
Around 2010.
So right around his death is when you really...
Yeah, probably.
I think that's the case with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Have you read Walter Isaacson's biography on Jobs?
No.
I think it's one of the seminal biographies everyone should read.
I've seen the movie based on it.
The Ashton Kutcher one or the Michael Fassbender one?
The Ashton Kutcher one.
That's the bad one.
What do you have against Ashton Kutcher?
He just doesn't do as good a performance as Michael Fassbender does.
Yeah, well, there you go.
You look at that, so that 2013 film, Jobs, versus the 2015 Steve Jobs. You have Michael Fassbender. You have Aaron Sorkin writing. it's a much better and more complete film.
Yeah.
That kind of really portrays the change of Jobs from, when he was at Apple at the start versus when he was kicked down, ended up at Next, and then from Next back to Apple, where he really became
Pixar in the meantime, one of the all-time greats.
Yeah.
A lot of Pixar films are in my all-time list of great movies.
What's your top 3 Pixar?
Top 3 is Moana Pixar? If Moana's Pixar, then Moana. I don't think it is.
I think Moana, if it's not Pixar, it's Disney animation, so I imagine it's a similar crew.
It wouldn't. I don't think it is. Let's see what I have
So
here.
give us not your top 3.
Wall-E.
Walt Disney.
Wall-E is number 1. Wall-E is such a good movie.
I understand the greatness in Wall-E, but it didn't hit as hard with me as other Pixar films do.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's my number 1. Cars. Is that Pixar?
It is Pixar. Again, not one of my favorite Pixars.
I just love Tow Mater. Like if my 3 idols, well, I don't really have idols. Like Steve Jobs is just, But yeah, Steve Jobs, Tow Mater, and myself in 10 years.
Well, that reminds me. Have you ever seen the Matthew McConaughey acceptance speech for the Oscar for Best Actor in 2013?
Yeah, no, that's probably where I stole it from.
It is. Yeah, his hero is him in 5 years. He's always chasing that hero. He's never going to become it, but he's always trying to be.
Well, when I got the podcast equipment that we're using today, I always wanted to start doing a grind set influencer type thing like Luke Belmar. Because they're all millionaires just for saying the most silly stuff.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd be a grind set influencer, and Luke Belmar, who's one of them, probably the dumbest person you'll ever meet, lowest IQ.
What do you have against Luke Belmar?
Oh, do you know of him?
I'm aware. Johnny Walker.
Yeah, Johnny Walker. He's just a dumb person. He thinks he's so deep.
Do you think that's kind of the Dunning-Kruger effect in real life?
What? I don't know.
He's so dumb, but he's that dumb that he doesn't realize he's so dumb, so he thinks he knows everything. He's not smart enough to know that he doesn't know things.
He can think whatever he wants. It's just so many people think he's, some like what he's saying is gospel, when he's just is like, I don't think he could be any dumber if he tried.
Would you think that's kind of more a greater comment on the downfall of young men in society? That they're just looking for people
It's
to
brain rot.
Yeah.
Like one of the things he said, he once said he took 6 months off work to sit around a campfire and think, and that's what his job was for 6 months.
Did he get paid for that?
No, but that's what he said his job was. Like it definitely didn't happen, and B, what a dumb thing to say. But yeah, Luke Belmar, one of the things he says, someone asked him, who's his idol? He says, me in 10 years.
So back to the original point, you still haven't given the last one in your list of Pixar. You had Wall-E.
Monsters Inc.
I rate that. I'm actually an Inside Out guy. I think
I love Inside Out.
I think Inside
Yeah.
Out is one of the great movies.
I'd probably
ever made.
bump Cars for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, how old were you when you watched Inside Out for the first time?
Oh, it's probably like 18. When did it come out?
2015.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I was probably 4 years later at the party. That sounds about right.
Yeah. I remember I watched it when I was 18 or 19. But still, a great film, no matter what audience it's made for, can have an inspiring effect on all who watch.
Ever since watching Inside Out, I've never been able to look at a person without wondering what is going on inside their head.
Yeah.
Like, because that's one of the quotes from the movie. Do you ever look at someone and wonder what is going on inside their head? Yeah. What was her name? The girl?
Riley.
That's
Riley,
right. Yeah.
Have you seen the sequel?
No.
Inside Out 2?
Yeah. What does she have in her head? She's got angry, sadness,
joy.
Joy
is the kind of the main character in the film.
Yeah, joy. Yes.
Disgust.
All right. So we're now joined with Patrick.
Welcome.
Thanks for coming on, Patrick.
Great to be here.
You're a braver man than many others.
Well, I don't know if there's a benchmark to compare me to yet, but perhaps I am the benchmark.
Patrick, you're an experienced podcaster. You've been on several before.
Well, not the people are supposed to know about.
Really? So you've been on a podcast before?
A few informal podcasts, yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Buried in history. I actually ran a less well-known YouTube channel with a few of my friends in.
Was it a bit of a COVID thing?
In school? No.
Oh, no.
It was more cringeworthy than that, I promise. But you'll never find it, so we can speak freely.
You know, I've got a few old podcasts lying around. It's not pretty. Anyway, Patrick, tell us about yourself.
Well, what can I say? I'm a 23-year-old, freshly 23-year-old, and currently I'm the president of the Victorian Young Liberals, which has been the
strongest branch?
Culmination of, well, indeed, the strongest division in the country, proudly so.
Is it actually?
Proudly so.
So back to your path into politics, you graduate from school, you go to Melbourne University. How do you get active on campus, and what brings you to becoming president of the Melbourne University Liberal Club, the most active and biggest politic club of Melbourne University?
And the oldest. Well, equal oldest with the Labor Club. They were both established in, I think, the same month in 1925. And to be fair, the Liberal Club was established in reaction to the establishment of the Labor Club. So we can't claim the title of being the oldest at Melbourne Uni, but we are the oldest Liberal Club that still exists, that still is functioning in the country, because the University of Sydney Liberal Club went defunct a few years ago and was replaced with the University of Sydney Conservative Club. But we're going to beat them to being 100 years alive and kicking, and that's going to be the case on the 18th of September this year, which is pretty exciting. Pretty exciting. But to your question, the way that I got involved in the first place, or in the first instance, is a funny story. I mean, I think people's paths to the positions they end up occupying are almost always circuitous. But I was the chair of my politics committee at school, and I won't bore you.
Your school had a politics committee.
Yeah, which is unusual, and I enjoyed running that for a year. Having the many kind of fertile and intelligent minds in the cohort able to meet once a week and debate each other and toss up the important issues of our time, however poorly and however rashly, and with whatever level of sophistication is possible in the mind of an 18-year-old or a 17-year-old, or indeed even younger. But I think that was a very formative experience for a lot of people, and I very much enjoyed being able to facilitate that, along with a few other kind of events and competitions. I did run a bit of an unauthorised essay competition.
Really?
Yes, ran a bit of an unauthorised, uncensored Facebook group as well, which people got into trouble for making a few comments in, but it was all part of free speech, I thought, really.
Oh, yeah. No, that's never good, the old Facebook comments.
No, it's particularly when people are sort of out there baiting and trying to get others in trouble and stuff.
Didn't the High Court say a news site, their Facebook comments, they're responsible for their Facebook comments?
That's right. That's right. That they are, at law, the publisher of those comments, and as a result, they can be held liable in defamation for those comments.
That's nuts.
I think there might have been some nuancing of that since, because they haven't all blocked commenting. There must have been some sort of understanding struck, or some sort of, maybe they were able to publish a disclaimer somewhere that offset the defamatory effect of the comments, even if they were still technically the publisher or something like that.
Yeah.
But they haven't all turned off comments, you'll notice. I thought it was an incredibly unhelpful decision from the High Court.
Yeah, that's nuts.
I mean, they're obviously not the publisher in any practical, real sense. Yeah. So anyway, defamation law is one of probably the most poorly formed torts that we have in Australia at the moment.
Yeah, infamously.
Yeah, indeed. It's a very blunt weapon for a very specific job. But putting that to one side, that was sort of my genesis as far as kind of leadership went. I did that, and I also did the community service committee in school, which is very, very rewarding. We did a lot of kind of early morning soup kitchens and getting students to go down and do those. I used to turn up in East Melbourne at the Lazarus Community House at I think 7:30 on Thursday mornings or something.
That's a house in Jada from
6:30 perhaps. Indeed.
Lazarus House.
That's right. I hope at least ours was more successful than his was. It hasn't been shut down to my knowledge.
Yeah. Mr. Joseph,
yes. Well, we had I think we might have even had a brother Joseph or something like that. But he was certainly a figure with the same sort of common touch. I thought Mr. Joseph had in Jonah from Tonga, who did a very laudable job in very difficult very difficult circumstances. No, he wasn't. I think he'd completely risen by that point. There was no more Lazarus rising to do. And we did a lot of good things. And I think it's important to kind of inculcate people with that sort of sense of, if you have time and ability and some sort of inclination to do something small to give back to the community. It doesn't need to be massive, but something small. And we did that very successfully. So that was good. I did that, and I ran the kind of debating program as well. So those were the sort of things I did in school.
Were you a good debater? Did you win much?
We did win.
Wow.
We did win the state championship one year.
Oh, wow.
Yes,
Wow.
and we won at one point or another throughout the 4 years from year 9 to year 12, every single school debating competition that was available. And we didn't win them every year, but we won the one that was run by the Asian Studies Department at Monash University. We won the British Parliamentary Championship.
Wow.
We won the Standard School 3v3 debating championship that everyone would know about, and we won the National Everett Model UN. So all of those at one point.
How do you win a Model UN?
It's all about negotiation.
Yeah.
It's all about the skill of knowing what to give up.
What country were you?
My favourite country really was Kuwait.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yes, yeah, it's a good one because aligned with the common interests of kind of the Western rules-based order. After the First and Second Iraq Wars, they've become obviously very closely aligned with the United States and to an extent with Saudi Arabia as well. But at the same time, you weren't tied to particular positions and you weren't burdened by the disadvantage in Model UN of being a veto power.
Yeah.
And the problem with being a veto power, of course, is that if you do exercise your veto unilaterally, and you're marked down very heavily for that because it's not very cooperative.
Yeah, no.
So you actually are in a less effective negotiating position because everyone knows you really shouldn't be using your veto.
Yeah.
And so they won't give you what you want because they know that you can't ultimately.
They should give every
vote against
country a
them.
veto when you think about it.
Yes, well, that would be entertaining, I think, in real life. It would also mean that in effect, decisions of the Security Council had to be unanimous, which I'm not sure
Does
about.
China have a veto?
It does.
Wow.
China. It used to be.
Originally,
the
or-
Republic of China.
Was it an
And
OG veto?
In the 1970s, it switched from the Republic of China,
Yeah.
what we would call Taiwan,
PRC.
and to the People's Republic of China.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, the kind of balance shifted. But it's a strange anachronism in many ways. I mean, France is on there and Germany isn't.
Germany were in no place to sign up when it was being founded.
No, they weren't. You can make the same argument of Japan.
Are they on there?
No, they're not.
Oh, they're not.
They're not. It's the permanent five. It's
Yeah.
Russia.
Yeah, Russia,
Formerly the
US.
USSR. China, United States, United Kingdom, and France, which obviously is a reflection of those who benefited most out of the Second World War. Anyway, another digression, but I digress. But yeah, so after that, in school, I kind of got involved in a few sort of things in the kind of youth liberal movement more broadly.
Yeah.
And that was everything from the kind of liberal students to things in the party.
Yep.
I just tried to get myself out there wherever possible and had no real idea what I was doing.
Yeah,
but it
how
was
did you
all very
first get
interesting.
involved? What was like your first few events and whatnot?
First time I actually ever met my soon-to-be colleagues in the Melbourne Uni Liberal Club was at a Camberwell branch party in, I think, February or January of 2020, which was pre-COVID. So we're into ancient history here. And it's, there's a photo where you actually had the kind of 2019 president and myself, and then this is the sitting president who was 19 to 20 to 21, and then the 21 to 22 president, and then me. So even though two of us weren't even there yet, there's actually we're all four in the one photo, which is an interesting piece of history. But no, I had no idea what I was doing, and you never do when you're kind of looking to get involved. But what's important is to have the right motivations and to do it for the right reasons, and to do it because you believe in making productive change, not believing in self-aggrandizement or in self-progression. And I think people
That's what I do.
Yes, well, George, you're subtle about it, which makes it okay, and you have an endearing and humorous presence. But I think most people can usually tell if you're trying to make headway for personal gain rather than for collective gain. And there's nothing wrong with a mix.
Ambition.
Nothing wrong with ambition, but it has to be healthy ambition that's targeted towards a constructive goal.
Yep.
And if you don't, people can tell. I've found that pretty much, I think, through most things I've done, which is that if you make it about yourself, you'll soon find yourself with very few supporters and very many opponents.
So then tell us, how do you make the jump then from president of the MOLC in its 98th year to the first Young Liberals vice president and then Young Liberals president of Victoria?
So it's a great question, and the only other person to have done both this century, that is to be Melbourne Uni president and Young Liberal president is Gideon Rosner, who's a famed kind of personality.
Libertarian now, isn't he?
He has joined the Libertarian
Oh,
Party.
really?
He did.
I thought he was a Liberal.
No, he left. He left the party.
Who were some of the big names of Malk presidents? Obviously, you got Michael O'Brien. Was he one?
Michael O'Brien, 92.
Michael O'Brien, yes, that's right. Sophie Mirabella.
Sophie Mirabella, around.
Bridget Valance, indeed.
Wow.
Many have made it into Parliament. James Patterson was a vice president, but there have been quite a number. Alan Stockdale, as I said before.
Vice president of the ALSF as well.
That's right. He was vice president of Malk and ALSF in the same year, and then
Alan Stockdale. Wow.
yep, that's right.
Yep,
1969.
Stockdale, 65.
That might be right.
Yep.
He's got the list up. So. my ears are a little out sometimes. Here we go. We've got the full
Robert Clark
list.
as well, two-time president.
Robert Clark.
That's right.
Two-time.
That's right.
Two-time.
He's a gun.
Richard also a notable.
David Kemp, former member for Goldstein.
Yep.
And of course
Goldstein.
Scott Pearce.
Yes.
Thought it was Upper House.
No, he wasn't.
There you go.
So there have been quite a number. It's and that should be no surprise at all. But it doesn't actually have the same prestige as, or the same kind of conveyor belt effect as I think places like Eton or Oxford and Cambridge do into the UK Conservative Party. And nor should it in many ways. You know, we're a far more open and classless society in that sense. No. But nonetheless, obviously people who display those sorts of aptitudes at university often go on to pursue them later in their careers and are often very worthy of the confidence of the members and the voters. I wouldn't include myself in that illustrious kind of band, but others have. Not to me, they've included themselves.
I thought you meant others said included you.
No, I'm not going to. Strange thing to background against yourself on the record. For yourself. Anyway.
So, Pat, you're the president of the Young Liberals. Now, tell us, what are the Young Liberals about?
Well, it's a community of young people who believe that freedom is the ultimate solution to the moral, political and social problems of our time and of the moral, political and social problems of all times, because that is the underlying and abiding view of liberalism as laid down by our foundational philosophers, people like Edward Burke and even before them, the Whig parliamentarians like Robert Walpole. And that is a basic belief in the rights and responsibilities of the individual and particularly how they relate to their society and their nation and the family unit, and an essential belief that government should be there by consent and by right of the governed, not by the preordination that I think others on the left would have it, which is to believe that government is basically there to grow itself and that it is a end in and of itself rather than a means to an end. And that, I think, is a very important distinction to draw, which is that authority almost always corrupts, and those with authority almost always use it to their own ends or to satisfy political objectives, such as using vast swathes of taxpayers' money to buy off one group or another, as we've seen the Labor Party very successfully do at the previous election by saying, well, we'll take...
We're not perfect either. Come on. We've got to be neutral.
No, we're not. And there is a legitimate case to be made that that political utilitarianism means that government decisions should basically be maximising of immediate short-term utility, and that those decisions in the elected government should be the kind of collective distillation of utilitarian needs from the body politic. But I think we can have a bit more of a principled and a bit more limited approach and recognise that government is often best when it is small, efficient and transparent, not when it is large and Byzantine.
Been thinking about this a lot recently, bit of a sidetrack. Do you reckon big business is becoming just as inefficient as government?
I think it's becoming just as indistinguishable. So, I mean, if you look at the situation and the web that the Labor Party has been able to build over the last 20 to 25 years, particularly at the federal level, although there are some state examples as well, it is extraordinarily impressive. It is extraordinarily impressive that now 12% of every single working Australian's incomes goes into funds which are half managed by the very unions that also manage and provide the leadership in human and other forms of capital to the Labor Party.
Yeah. Is that CBUS?
CBUS is a good example.
Yeah.
CBUS is a good example, but all industry super funds are part managed. Retail super funds are different, which is the distinction. And that's kind of the ongoing divide. And retail super funds have generated actually quite good returns over the last 10 years, and hence the kind of the capital flight from industry super funds. But regardless, the whole point of the industry super fund is that you work in a particular industry, you contribute to that fund, and that fund invests back in the industry.
Yeah.
Now, that sounds fine.
Yeah.
Until you start injecting billions and billions of dollars.
And you've got very powerful people at the top who control that money.
Yes, well, the president of CBUS is also the federal president of the Labor Party.
Really?
Wayne Swan.
Wayne Swan. I was thinking the secretary. My bad. What's his name?
You mean the director,
Erickson.
Paul Erickson?
Paul Erickson, yeah.
But yes, I mean, it is an extraordinarily impressive situation, and the amount of capital that's now retained in super funds, and every single time anyone's income is contributed, 1% of that or 2% of that gets taken out in fees. And the use of those fees is entirely unregulated.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be used for the benefit of the members.
Yeah.
And the example is Hester spends $5 million sponsoring the Brisbane Lions.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's how people want their retirement savings.
Yeah, no,
used,
that's so dumb.
but none of us know, because none of those people get a vote at an annual AGM.
Yeah.
I mean, if any corporation acted the way that they acted, as far as, I mean, there's been this massive fight over Elon Musk's remuneration package where all he did was give himself some shares, not even cash, just shares. And if he was running a super fund, that wouldn't even be noticed. So
Yeah.
the double standard is extraordinary.
Yeah, no, it's actually crazy, the super industry. I think, and
Yes, it's very impressive, as I say. It's very
I
impressive.
think it's slightly better than America, where they've got the states controlling retirement funds. But
They're also optional.
we're heading down that direction.
They're also optional. And I think it would be entirely reasonable for this situation to exist in a voluntary system. And I actually think, and this is the most kind of socialist centralised government take you'll hear from me, which is I actually think there is some sort of case for, I'm not saying we should do this now or that it should ever be done, but there is at least a prima facie case for a default government-run superannuation fund that draws no fees, apart from legitimate administration
the fees. The fees are crazy, and they also sign you up to this insurance that you never opt for.
That's right. And here's the kicker, which is that if you die and you forgot to renew your death benefit notification form or death benefit nomination form in the last 2 or 5 years, depending on what the deadline is, which is very hard to find out, you don't get to give your cash to the heir of your choice.
Yeah, wow.
Yep. So they will decide where your money goes when you die.
Yeah.
They will decide where it's invested in the term of your natural life. And then you'll be taxed for the pleasure of doing so under the new unrealised capital gains tax scheme, which will eventually capture all young people. It is a tax on young people. It's not a tax on those who already hold super. It is a tax on those who will hold greatly inflated balances of super in the future. So you can add that to the litany of taxes that effectively put an economic damper on every single thing that young people are wanting and should be wanting to do, which is to work, to save, to invest, to buy a home.
And a big thing about super, like you were saying before, the liberal values, the right of the individual, superannuation is money that you've technically earned and you're forced to give it away to someone to manage.
Yours.
Yeah.
It's yours. No doubt about it. So look, unfortunately, the framers of our constitution did not have the foresight to imagine the level of statutory distortion of what originally was a legal fiction created by courts to provide for the inheritances of knights who were called away on service in 12th century England, which is the trust. And that was originally a concept that existed purely for testamentary purposes. And then it grew into many other purposes, such that you could create one. You could create an express trust for investment. You can create an express trust to hold assets. You can create an express trust to use particular income in a particular way, like many schools are managed by trusts, and that's all very legitimate. And that's an example of the sort of flexibility of the common law when it comes to property and income, and which is a great feature of particularly the economic systems of English-speaking countries, and a very significant reason that we have done better than our civil law European counterparts as far as GDP per person and all those other measures of wealth and productivity and development go. But to then take that and use that as a way to circumvent the the provision in our constitution which prevents the compulsory acquisition of property without due compensation, and to say that, well, because your money's in a trust and you compulsorily have to contribute it to a trust in a way that is not technically taxation, because it's not the government taking your money, but it's the government moving it from your hands into the hands of a corporate trustee, as is the case with all major super funds, to say that, well, because we've created this system and because you then don't technically own that anymore, then it can be sort of deprived from you in a kind of very arbitrary way. Now, true, even if you owned that, it could still be taxed by normal legislation. The Constitution doesn't just protect your property no matter what, but the spirit of it did. And the idea was that you would own your money, you would pay tax on it now, and you could do with the rest of it what you wanted to do. But this leads us on to a further discussion. So I think we can all recognise that super is broken, and there's this loophole where they can effectively force you to put your savings somewhere, keep them there for 40 years, and then tax them to completely arbitrarily.
Yeah.
But I was actually kind of
and invest it where the unions want.
That's right.
Yeah.
So isn't that an extraordinary situation? And if you want the pleasure of determining where your own investment goes, you have to start up a self-managed super fund and pay tens of thousands of dollars in yearly accounting fees.
It's inaccessible.
Did you know where income tax started? Do either of you know
Great
this?
Depression, in response to the Great Depression or the war?
No, I think Lincoln introduced the first income tax in the Civil War.
Earlier. It was raised by Pitt, Prime Minister William Pitt, to pay for the debt of the Napoleonic Wars.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 10% tax was levied on
And
all
it's
incomes
just,
over
it's
100.
just stuck around like a bad smell.
Yep. I
like
think
me.
it was originally levied in, I think, 1812 or 1818, something like that, just, in the aftermath of Waterloo, where the English effectively bankrupted themselves. Their debt was kind of larger than that of Japan or something in terms of GDP, or larger than Japan's debt is today. It was raised to pay those debts. 10% was levied on all incomes over £150 a year.
Yeah.
Because it was a quick way of raising capital very, very easily to fill up the treasury coffers. And that is still the case. These taxes do not exist because they are the best taxes economically.
Yeah.
They do not exist because they impose the lowest burden on productivity, or they tax capital that's being used unproductively, or they tax earnings that are being spent or assigned unproductively. They exist because they are easy to raise. It's the same reason governments abolished truck. It's the same reason, which is the exchange of some of the produce of someone's labour for their labour. It's the same reason that their governments are very, very heavily regulating Bitcoin, which is that they want economic activity to occur in a way that is very, very easy for them to accrue returns and accrue income from.
Yeah.
It is that simple.
What's your preferred form of tax?
Excise.
Excise.
It is the least economically distortionary tax.
Yeah.
And it also, importantly, gives individuals the most choice.
So does that include GST, or are you talking
That's
like
GST.
on the... Oh, yeah.
GST, yeah. So
Yeah.
GST, VAT.
So you're talking like alcohol, tobacco. Like get all our money from
those are
alcohol,
not,
tobacco.
those are not GST. Those are not GST.
Yeah.
No, look.
You say we have something to thank Peter Costello for. So he introduced GST to the Australian system.
And a great decision it was,
July 1st,
because
2000.
it equalised the different state income taxes and other sales taxes, and states gave that up in exchange for a financial grant on an annual basis from the Commonwealth. That said, we've retained income tax, and the tax share of GDP has risen over time. Actually hasn't risen by that much. That's a testament to the massive kind of resources boom that we've had over the last 15, 20 years, not a testament to the efficiency of government taxation. But what has happened is that you've got a 10% GST, 10% sales tax, and there was a campaign running against this in the beginning, which is that it would make things more expensive at the checkout, which is true, and that's why kind of basic foodstuffs and other services are exempted. There are interesting...
And a 10% increase isn't that much when you think about
But the
what we've been through.
exemptions were never planned for. They had to negotiate with the crossbench before 2004
Yeah,
election.
That's right. The same reason they had
Australian
to...
Democrats say
same
it's
reason they had to
made
ban nuclear energy generation in Australia.
Yeah. The exemptions just make life so hard for accountants and bookkeepers.
They do. They do. And that's, maybe that's an economic cost that we can bear.
Like need to itemise receipts and everything. It's a pain in the ass.
Yes, well, if you look at, probably no one else does this, but if you look at the tax on your receipt at the supermarket,
Yeah,
it ends up being probably 2 to 3%. overall, because a lot of what you're buying is kind of depending on what you're buying. But
what we've been through, like in the past 5 years, what's our inflation been over the past 5 years? It's been way more than 10%.
I think it's cumulative around 20%.
Yeah,
that would be about right, I think.
So GST is nothing. I don't know what those people were complaining about in 2004. They haven't lived what we've lived
2000.
through.
But it's not inflationary. It's just a one-time price bump.
Yeah.
That's right. And it's just about setting a new balanced growth path for prices in the economy. And
the revenue is proportionate to growth, which is great.
That's right. That's a very important characteristic. And there is no bracket creep. There's no bracket creep. So I think it is very important for us to get back to a lot of these principles, which is that the original idea of taxation. The original idea of taxation was that it was voluntary.
Yeah.
So
really.
you had to go and consult the Commons. You had to go and ask Parliament to raise taxation. The King had to go and ask Parliament. This is what caused the English Civil War. And to say, I would like to raise this charge. Or I would like to raise, they used to do things like they would collect a levy for the maintenance of the Navy or, to raise funds to go to war, because that's pretty much all the Crown did, right? There was no welfare. There was no government services. They basically just either they had a household and they had an army, and you would have to go to this is literally why Parliament exists, which is the frequency of wars and the frequency of the need for capital to fund those wars in the early medieval period meant that you had to effectively open up the tent and bring more people around the table and effectively representatives of the kind of economic interests of the entire country and say, look, we've got to go to war, guys. We're going to need you to help us pay for it, please. Yeah. And this caused debates for centuries, right? But that was the original idea. And we've now got to a point where governments treat it not as the people's privilege, but as their right. Yeah. Is their right. And that is just so fundamentally wrong for so many obvious reasons, not the least of which is that, as Pierre Poilievre says, the government produces nothing. Nothing. The government does not produce anything. It does not add a cent back to the economy as far as kind of innovation and as far as production goes. Obviously, it spends money, but it doesn't produce in the way that private economic actors produce. Not in the classical sense, at least. Obviously, in theory, it can, but it doesn't. So, what we need to get back to is the recognition that if you want to contribute to the tax base, you can. But if you want to alter your economic activity in a way that still contributes to the collective welfare of everyone in the society by doing things like working, by doing things like investing in worthy projects that are there to deliver cheaper goods and cheaper services to people in a competitive market, to consumers in a competitive market, then that's your right. But we shouldn't punish all of those things, and we should draw a distinction between non-productive expenditure and productive expenditure. And that is exactly the nature of a consumption tax. By its very definition, when you consume, you are at the end of the chain of production. And what you are doing is you are expending discretionary income except in very kind of base circumstances, right? Like things like utilities, things like basic food, and those aren't subject to a GST. There are some interesting international examples that don't draw that distinction in terms of the kind of discretionary versus non-discretionary income. For instance, New Zealand. New Zealand has a very broad base, and this is the idea of broad-based tax, but theirs is even broader based than ours. And that broad-based tax effectively is on all expenditure. So even when you kind of renew your license or you pay a government fee or like a court fee or something like that, that's subject to GST too.
Isn't it the same here?
No, those are all exempt.
Government services are all exempt.
As far as I know, yes. You don't pay GST on your Victorian's license renewal or something. And you definitely don't pay it on those other exemptions we've talked about. That said, I don't know that there's a case for broadening that base of expenditure. I don't think it's quite fair to say to people that, well, we're now going to expect you to pay a consumption tax on broccoli. That should be left alone. Non-discretionary expenditure that is about,
I reckon just chuck it on it. Make it simple. Just make life simple.
And chuck it on everything.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a very difficult thing for you to tell every student who's moved out of home to study at university that their rent is suddenly going to be 10% more.
Really, rent's not subject to GST?
No, rent is not subject to GST.
Oh, obviously you can rent, but I'm talking like, say you're a business.
No, once you make the case for one exception, it opens the door to many others.
No, but I think goods that you buy, goods and services that like any business would do, like rent's obviously different because rent's
Is it? How is it different?
But say you're a business and you just bought all this stuff, you got to itemize everything on the receipt, see what the
George, what will all
included in
the accountants
GST?
do for jobs?
What?
We know
No,
jobs,
You
and
say,
we know
you
growth.
say the government
We know jobs and no
produces
growth in the
nothing. What do
accountancy
accountants
sector.
produce?
In the accountancy sector.
What do accountants produce?
Nothing.
Nothing, exactly.
Nothing. They are a creature created by government.
Yeah, exactly.
A creature created by
If
government.
we got rid of all tax, there would be zero need for accountants. Just auditors, maybe.
Well, I
Keep
think
big
I don't know
business
if that's the world I want to live in, Jordan.
I think
It would be
double
too
entry
much
accounting
choice.
system predates the tax system. The double entry accounting system predates the tax system.
But what job would accountants have if we don't have it?
You'd still have to manage your flows of income.
You just get Excel.
Someone would have to input it in there.
I think that's more bookkeeping, really.
Yeah.
Yes, well, we could do another podcast on the history of accounting.
Yeah.
And then we can give kind of gold stars to anyone who sits through it. But point is,
I already know who we can have as our special guest on the episode. Our good friend, Kasara Pereira.
Oh, is he an accountant?
Yep,
Yes.
uprising star in audit.
indeed.
We'll move on because we're only on the third point. We'll
Easy to get going,
We've
isn't
got to
it?
keep it moving. The federal election we just had, 2025 federal election. We'll do a bit of an analysis on that. Where do we think we went wrong? Thoughts?
So the first thing to say is that obviously a very disappointing result, and that was a result of the very poor campaign that was run, which did not have a substantive policy offering that gave an alternative to a government that people actually did not want to vote for. People did not want to see the Albanese government re-elected. They thought they'd made a pretty significant fist of managing the country over the last 3 years. Life was a lot harder. We had the largest collapse in disposable income and standard of living in the OECD over those 3 years, and ordinarily that would be a death knell for any government. So the fact that we were able not to provide a reasonable alternative to that, I think, is an Olympian achievement in and of itself. That said, there will be a full election review process, and kind of I don't want to preempt that, but it is clear that a lot of things were wrong, but and a lot of mistakes were made during the campaign. And what that tells you is that most voters only switch on 3 or 4 weeks before an election.
Yeah.
And we're in the business of doing this stuff full time, and voters are in the business of doing everything else that is important in the country full time,
As it should be.
They're in the business of working real jobs and raising families and all the rest of that. And they deserve a clear, simple, well thought through, honest, genuine, intelligent vision for how the country is going to be run. And when they don't see it, they know it. And that is, I think, a example of democracy working well. I don't think we deserved to win that election. I don't think the government deserved to win it either, really. I don't think anyone deserved to win it. It was terrible. But that all said, we are now in a position where we have to reflect on what, if anything, should be salvaged as a lesson learned from that campaign. And the first thing to say is that we obviously did win back the seat of Goldstein.
Yeah.
Or Tim Wilson won back the seat of Goldstein, and did that as a Liberal candidate. And that is
And we also saw major swings in a lot of them types of seats as well.
That's right. So what we thought was
Minor swings.
a population. Well, there's a movement forwards on the primary and on the two-party preferred McNamara, which is the adjoining seat, which is a very, not dissimilar sort of geography and demography, even though it's a bit more urbanite and a bit younger and a bit more multicultural and a bit more renting and all the rest of that. We have a kind of, I think, a bit of an issue with understanding that country is just not what it once was. Gen Z is now the largest demographic generational cohort by a very long way, and people are living different lives than they used to. They're not getting married as young as they are. They don't necessarily have the same economic or financial priorities. They're looking for different things from their political leaders. But that said, we've also had very good economic circumstances for 40 years, and no one who is our age or even 10 years older than us has been through a serious economic downturn. Because the last one was in the early 90s.
I think it's I think it's still right now we're in a bit of a tough period, but we've got more people than ever behind on their mortgages. Our biggest company is now Combank, who's in a business of issuing debt rather than, a mining company or something like that. So I think economically we're in a pretty tough spot.
Yes, and the only sector of sustained growth is government.
Yeah.
Every other sector of private production has gone backwards.
Yeah.
In recent times, and that is the truest indicator of where the economy is really heading, right? It's not about the artificial short-term Keynesian lever of government spending, about employing more people and about sending more money into kind of white elephant infrastructure projects.
Yeah.
It's about whether the corner bakery, whether the mum and dad logistics company can afford to employ the sixth person, whether they can afford to buy the next van, whether they can afford to open the second franchise.
Yeah.
That is the true health of the economy, and those people are on the front lines of when things are going well and when things are going poorly. And so what the government has now done is it's decided to pick winners and losers. And the winners are people who work for them, and the losers are everyone else.
Yeah.
So things are going very badly, and the fundamental number that tells you whether people are actually going to get better off, wealthier, more secure over time is the number called productivity. And I think it's actually a very misunderstood concept because people hear it and they think, well, that's just about me working harder. And there's a kind of understanding of that I can see. But it's not about that. It's about how much your work produces. It's about, at the end of the day, when I've worked my shift, am I working on a better software program? Am I working on a newer machine?
Yeah. How much value have I just made shareholders?
Indeed. And let's not forget that most people are 100% shareholders in their own business. Yeah. And those who are small business people, it's about do I have technology, but also am I working in a firm or in a company that's going to reward my hard work in a way that I'm actually incentivized to do it if I have the time to. And systematically over time, we have built structures where that sort of work is not incentivized, where that innovation is not encouraged. And as a result, we've seen particularly capital flight, for example, of venture capital to other parts of the world. We're now closed off to all sorts of technological innovation that's now being done offshore. And all that we do is import it. And whenever we do that, we will never, ever be the beneficiaries. Yeah. We'll never be the beneficiaries. And most importantly, a lot of that's being done because the vastly distorted.
The best if you want the best, eh?
No, that's right. You've got to make it at home.
What does a coalition have to do to win back win Gen Z in the first place?
Look, the coalition, I think, the Liberal Party, I would say, because I'm a member of the Liberal Party, and ultimately elections are won and lost based on whether you win the middle suburbs and the inner city, really, because that's ultimately where just the majority of the population live. Not to say that the regions aren't unimportant, they are. And regional centres like Bendigo and Ballarat and Geelong and Newcastle are becoming increasingly more important, politically speaking as well as economically speaking. But that said, ultimately, it's 4/5 of Victoria and I think probably 2/3 of New South Wales and a large chunk of South Australia and Western Australia live in or around a major capital city. And that's ultimately where political fortunes kind of rise and fall. And that's just the reality of the kind of maths of modern urban living. And as far as the Liberal Party's prospects in those suburbs go, and particularly those suburbs where electorates where there are a lot of young people are living, it is of no surprise, I think, and this is where I would actually be pretty harsh on our legacy of the last 9 years in government, which is to say that I'm not sure that we did offer young people much of an economic vision, right? I'm not sure we did say we're actually going to make it easier to get ahead where you've got a bright idea for something you want to work really hard on and take a risk on, or whether you just want to get an education in an affordable and secure way, whether you want to be able to be an apprentice at 16 and be able to have the freedom, let's say, to drive the ute to work or drive the tray truck to work at 17 rather than at 18. Yeah. Those sorts of things where we're actually looking at how do we free up the economy? Yeah. How do we make it work for people? And most centrally above all, how do we then how do we empower them by giving them something to earn for at the end of the day, which is the security of home, right? You're never going to believe that your future is secure or that there is, kind of hope around the corner unless you can get out of the cycle of needing to rent, because whenever you're renting, yes, you might be saving a small amount, but ultimately you're living a hand-to-mouth existence. Yeah. And I think obviously the psychology of having something to own is important, but I wouldn't buy into this kind of narrative of, if you don't own something, you don't value it. I don't think that's true at all. Yeah. But what is far more important is the security that actually gives you. The security to say every single cent I pay down on my mortgage is a cent that I'm not wasting. I'm not paying it to a landlord who I resent. Yeah. I'm not paying it worse still to a corporate or commercial landlord. Yeah. And it's not something that I would like to save. It's actually an investment in my future. Yeah. because every single cent you pay down on your mortgage, obviously with a certain proportion taken in interest, is actually a purchase of value. It's actually a purchase of value for the future, and eventually one day you can look at paying that off. Hopefully in less than 30 years, but one day you can look at paying that off, and you can go, well, now I have the economic security to start a business. Yeah. Now I have the economic security to raise a family, and I have the premises in which to do so. And I know that this is where I'm going to be living, and I can choose to live here for as long as it takes to educate my children, rather than the possibility of a 10% rent increase, meaning me and my partner are going to have to move out. I mean, these are real practical, important things that actually matter in people's lives. I think that we often kind of get caught up in this philosophical reverie of, the romance of owning a small piece of the country. That all matters. That is all important. But what is far more important is the genuine impact it actually has in people's lives and their prospects and views for the future. And that economic promise, and again, this is what Pierre Poilievre talks about as the kind of promise of Canada. I would also say it's the promise of Australia, which is just simply failed. I mean, there is no other word for it. It has broken. And it is broken because we failed to recognise the harm that government intervention was doing in the economy. Yeah. And the government intervenes in the housing market in so many ways. I mean, yes, some of this is state, but as far as I'm concerned, political leadership is about using all the levers of all governments that are available.
So where do you reckon we've gone wrong? What are some key milestones?
Well, George, have you tried to build a house recently?
My parents have.
And how have they found that experience?
Well, cost of building since COVID's gone up 50%.
Yep.
The cost of a build.
Yep.
I guess that disincentivises developers. And a lot of people I know have recently bought a house, first home buyers. They've bought a house, they're doing the mortgage payments, being drowned in mortgage payments, and they're not really seeing capital growth either. So it's kind of a lose-lose for everyone.
Well, that's right. And
no winners at all.
And there has.
And renters don't like it either.
No, they don't. And whether you're trying to build a house or whether you're going to a rental inspection, there's a feeling of hopelessness because you turn up at, I don't know if you've been to one recently, but you turn up at a rental inspection and there's 100 other people there. And you don't, why would you even bother putting in an application under those circumstances, really? So, look, on the one hand, you are going to have a very, very hard time renting in Victoria today because the state government is doing everything it can to tax landlords, and that means that landlords are either raising their rent or they're leaving the market. So there's less rental stock available, and that's always going to drop, push prices up, despite all the regulatory attempts to control that. Those are still going to rise over time. All those properties are going to be sold, and they might be sold to a first home buyer. True, they probably won't be. They might be sold to a first home buyer. But even if they are sold to a first home buyer, all that does is tip the scales, right? All that does is say, well, what we're going to do is we're going to reward the people who can just afford to buy a home in the next 2 years. Maybe just. But everyone, George, who's under sort of 26, 27, who is looking at buying a home when they're 30. No, too bad. Because your rent's going to be so expensive that you will just never, ever be able to save to get there, and you'll have to rent from your super fund for the rest of your life.
The thing I hate the most is everyone buying a house today will need a mortgage.
Yes.
Like there's no way to not get a mortgage. No way around it.
Has that not always been the case? People have to...
people
have to get a mortgage to buy a house.
I don't know. And 50 years ago, people could just buy it outright because it was 20% interest rates.
So there is obviously an inverse relationship between the cost of debt and the cost of housing. So when the cost of debt rises, that is a negative demand side shock, and the supply side, housing kind of market stays the same, and as a result of that, you get a drop in prices, and that's what's happened in Australia.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say, when you get a house, you're putting yourself in a 30-year mortgage, which is just huge.
Oh, I mean, people are really burdened by debt, and that is a very, very unfortunate thing. Particularly,
and they're the biggest profit makers, the banks.
Yes. Although the banks are very heavily regulated, and they're also creatures of the system.
I don't think regulated enough. I hate banks.
You can certainly try and look. You can regulate profit out of the market, and that's fine. But you will then find that the Commonwealth Bank has a very significant difficulty maintaining equity finance, or maintaining it's kind of that capital, and that ultimately ends up costing depositors and debt holders. So you can pull the string one way or the other with these sorts of things, but the real variable that actually matters is the RBA cash rate, because that's the cost of their debt, and that is a variable that in many senses is controlled by government.
So With the cash rate, is that what the banks get it at?
That's right. So
why don't we just cut the middleman and just give it straight to the people? That's what I've never understood.
Yes, well, the RBA could operate as a retail bank. That's true. And then you could transfer all of your anger, Georges, from the convenient corporate frontman for government mistakes to the government itself, and maybe that would actually be a good thing. But look, ultimately the RBA is not in a competitive situation, so it's got no incentive to keep its debt affordable.
But they are the cheapest.
That's true.
Do you think maybe we should go back to the 363 model for banks?
I don't know what that is.
Pay 3% on deposits, lend it back out at 6, and then hit the golf links by 3.
Look, there's obviously been kind of a lot of movement on this in the last decade in Australia. There's been a Royal Commission, which in which they were genuinely kind of entrapping people who couldn't afford to take out a mortgage, but were desperate to do so, and those people ended up in a terrible situation, which is that they spent every cent they could purely kind of on paying the interest on the minimum repayments, and ended up without a house. And that is unfortunate, and that should be avoided wherever possible by the kind of rigorous regulatory instruments that there now are about assessment of a person's ability to pay back a loan at 3% higher interest rate than what you're offering, and the actual request for documents and proof of income. I've kind of looked into this process myself, and I mean it is rigorous, but it doesn't change the fundamental fact that the burden of mortgages is huge on a lot of people, huge, and it puts them at the mercy of a government lever, which is that interest rate. And I don't want to hear this kind of, the RBA is independent. It was made independent by government. Government is ultimately responsible for all of these economic
and Jim Chalmers,
and it's responsible for the inflation because it's caused solely by government expenditure. I mean, we had a situation that was so absurd, particularly at the height of when inflation was running at kind of 5%. Last year before, you had the governor of the Reserve Bank literally blaming not federal government expenditure, because that's who she was appointed by. No, it's Michelle Bullock, because she was appointed by the Albanese Chalmers government, and no doubt she'd like to be reappointed. I'm not imputing any kind of motives or bias on her at all, but I think it's just the fundamental nature of having this kind of arm's length system of independent government agencies and commissions that aren't really actually, not in a real sense, independent. Not in the sense that, for instance, judges are independent.
What were the changes that Chalmers made to the Fed? What did he do?
There was a change in the governance structure so that there's now a monetary board which sets the interest rates.
So it's not the actual board.
Yes, it's sort of been separated.
Yeah.
So that's the and that includes a number of people. It includes the chief economist. It includes the Treasury Secretary. It does draw from different parts of government, and that's correct. And I think they are probably making reasonably good decisions under the circumstances, but they are ultimately a servant of government, and I think we should just be honest about that. I don't think there's actually a problem with that. I think we should just be honest about it. But
I think it operates well.
Was that not done to mirror the Federal Reserve System with the Federal Open Market Committee?
Yeah, I believe it may have been. That is true. But that central bank independence was a movement kind of economic theorists in the late 90s, and was, I don't actually know whether it was put into place in the United States or the UK first, but it was put into place on the day after Tony Blair won government in the United Kingdom, and he and his treasurer Gordon Brown just effectively called up the governor of the Reserve Bank and said, the Bank of England, and said, you're independent now as far as monetary policy goes. And look, that system of dependent government-controlled, directly executive-controlled policy rate setting had some serious impacts. I mean, there's famously planned Black Wednesday where they tried to enter the European exchange rate mechanism at a very high conversion rate of, I think, £2.75 to the euro, when really it should have been something more like £2.50. And the European market and the American market figured this out, and they were betting against the exchange rate, and that put extraordinary pressure on the Bank of England and on the government at the time, which was John Major's government, to raise that interest rate, because at that time there was the dual policy mandate of using the cash rate to manage inflation indirectly, as there is now, but also to manage the exchange rate. And you put that in the hands of an executive government which has political interest, and that created problems and it created inconsistencies and it created uncertainties for investors. So there was a legitimate cause for this, but I think it's now gone too far in the opposite direction. I think there's kind of others who would say this as well, which is that you now have governments that push huge amounts of cash into the economy. I mean, you run a budget that only has a $4 billion surplus in a year where your tax take has increased by 30% because of inflation in people's incomes and a mining boom, which, by the way, is another reason to go back to an excise tax rather than income tax, but I digress. And you're only running a $4 billion surplus. It should be no surprise that all that money you're pushing back into the economy and kind of uncontrolled spending is going to create inflation. And, inflation is a dual tax because on the one hand, it robs people at the checkout and it also robs them, as you say, at the bank.
You're a real Pierre Polveri fan, aren't you?
But he gets a lot of things right, I think. Yeah, he does. And if we want to talk about how to win young people, which is the kind of genesis of this question, that happens by looking at how we can make the housing market more fair and just. And
I think Pierre Polveri is really good at selling economic policy. I've never seen anyone do it like him.
He's good at putting it into simple terms, right?
Yeah.
Housing costs have doubled, rent has doubled. We've built homes, not built bureaucracy. That's one of my personal favourites. And, we are going to bring back common sense for common people. So it's these catchy rhetorical lines that matter. But he won young people. I mean, the Conservatives didn't quite win in Canada. They had their highest vote share ever. Obviously, they've been in existence since the 1980s after the demise of the Progressive Conservative Party, which obviously sounds strange to even think about such an oxymoronic title now. But they won on the backs, or they won their seats and votes on the backs of young voters. And they did that because they were able to sell this economic vision of the future and an economic vision of reward, where it isn't the case that kind of stagnant government intervention in everything from planning to tax to energy has resulted in high inflation, high interest rates and a shortage of housing completions. I mean, it is just hard not to stress enough that the reason that market failures occur, the reason there is an excess of housing demand is because of government intervention. I mean, that's one of the lack of competition, high barriers to entry, government intervention are your sort of top three reasons, then that is what has happened.
Yeah. And what Labor what Bill Shorten wanted was to get rid of negative gearing and have it all owned by BlackRock, and we just rent off BlackRock for the rest of our lives.
Yes. Well, that is a vision. That is a vision. And it's also true of renting off your super fund, which is, the whole sort of premise.
Well, they prop up the housing market heaps because they own a lot of the commercial real estate.
Yeah. I mean, commercial is obviously different because it's kind of...
But I think it's still locked in a bit with the residential market.
Yeah, well, the reason... So as far as I know, 98% of rental properties... rental property either by value or by kind of address count is owned by private mum and dad investors. And the reason for that is the different tax treatment, right? So that's all. There's negative gearing off your income, which is higher, and your income is taxed at a higher rate than a corporate income tax. So the tax treatment of owning it as an individual is far more enticing than that of owning it as a corporate or a commercial investor, and therefore those end up being the landlords. But the case with commercial property is that its values are so high that obviously it kind of has to be developed and managed in a commercial way that's beyond the means of an individual or a private syndicate of investors.
Back to Albo. This is something that Lockie and I disagree on. Do you reckon Albo and his team are good campaigners?
Yes.
You reckon they are?
I think he's very good at election campaigns.
Really?
Yep.
I didn't expect
George, I think you're the only person in Australia who doesn't think Albo is a good campaigner.
I don't think he is. I think he's very bad. I think we've always been worse. And case in point, The Voice.
I think he is actually a relatively unimpressive presence. But I think voters are actually looking for something, particularly, and it is all about the comparison, I agree, but they're often looking for a kind of avuncular, kind of somewhat boring steward. I mean, Mark Carney, I would say I would put in exactly the same category. A bit boring. But that's what kind of people want sometimes in their leadership. They want stability. They want someone who they know is not going to make any kind of really crazy, rash decisions. But you put him up against someone who is a real erudite statesman. If you put him up against John Howard, for instance, I think he'd struggle.
Yeah, no.
In the same way as
if you were saying there's an election, bring your best leader, who would you bring? Not Albo.
No, I think if you were to put for the same reason,
Kevin Rudd on elbow in terms of campaigning.
Far better. Yeah, far better. If you would have put Bill Clinton up against Trump, I think Bill Clinton would have won, right? But you didn't put Bill Clinton up against Trump, right? You put a succession of two people, neither of whom were qualified to be there.
Yeah, like honestly, I'd say Albo's bottom 10% of people I could think of.
Look, I think he has a way of delivering a message and sticking to a message that was about Medicare, it was about TAFE, it was about protecting against cuts, it was about the fact that the economy was slowly recovering and somewhat getting better.
I don't even think that did anything really. I just think people didn't like Peter Dutton.
Look, some of the research suggests that was a very important element, but those targeted kind of, acts of fiscal stimulus were also very effective. I mean, HECS, TAFE.
Yeah.
I mean, the number of young people I spoke to who said, I have voted Conservative or Liberal for my entire life, or 2 elections of it or whatever it was, or 1 election, last time and the time before. And this time I'm voting Labor because of HECS.
HECS, yeah.
That's why they won Melbourne.
Yeah.
It's responsible for the result in Brisbane. It's because, the number of young voters just went, I want that. So sometimes you do just identify these touchstone
There's not a policy
policies.
I hate more than, free uni or reduced HECS. I think it's the worst thing ever.
It's robbing from Peter to pay Paul, isn't it, right?
Yeah.
It's like, who's going to be paying the bill for
Reverse Robin Hood.
Who's going to be paying the bill for that HECS tent? It's like, you with the income taxes you're going to pay in the future. Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a joke, right? It's musical chairs. But unfortunately, that's the nature of politics.
Like if you want to be, worst case, don't index it. Just keep it, interest free. I always thought HECS was interest free.
If it's interest free, what's the?
But I just always thought it was interest free. That's what everyone always told me. It was interest free.
Well, it almost is now.
Yeah.
Keep your HECS debt going for as long as possible because, not financial advice, general comment, but keep it going because I'm going to keep mine going.
Yeah. And if you look at some ETFs, they do it every year.
Yeah. Oh, if you could pay off some HECS, you're far better off putting that money in some sort of even in a debt security with current rates.
Even home loans, 5%. Like if you can take a home loan out, take a 5%. You'd take that, chuck it in the market, bang. And then pay off the HECS in 10 years or whenever they really force you to. But and also, I mean, look, again, this is not a helpful thing to say, but the one thing that it really tells people is there might be a bit more of this coming, and they might kind of cut again. So keep your debt in there, which is a horrible perverse incentive. And I think it's really wrong to the people who had already paid off their debt. Yeah, no,
the fact that it was retrospective.
Yeah.
Like if you started it now and said, look, we just think education's very valuable and we're attaching a higher collective value to that education and we're therefore not going to index HECS loans that are taken out from 2026 onwards as much. Yeah. Like, I might disagree with you on the numbers there, but I don't disagree with you on the principle. I disagree with you on the principle. I think it's fundamentally wrong to just be like, okay, we're renegotiating this economic bargain now. I don't care that you worked double shifts at your barista job for the last 3 years to pay off your HECS debt.
Yeah.
So that you could have the freedom to, take a holiday or rent a place or take a risk inside a business. And you are literally being punished for that by comparison to the people who
and you're the one who was having to pay for the other people's with your tax.
That's right.
As well.
That's right.
So not only you miss out on
the privilege of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's disgusting, really. And it's really buying votes. That's all it is.
It is. It's an extraordinary situation, but that resonated with people. And so, look, ultimately the real skill of political campaigning is to be able to deliver a message succinctly and repeatedly.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, should we move on to our external questions?
Yeah.
All right, let's segue onto our external questions. Our first one comes from a friend of yours, David Kitchen. We have touched on this a little, but who are the leaders around the world, past and present, that Australian politicians should try and emulate to appeal to Gen Z?
Pierre Poilievre, David Cameron.
Interesting.
And Shinzo Abe.
Shinzo. Great.
Pierre Poilievre for the reasons I've talked about. David Cameron, because he was a genuinely very effective, skilled and principled politician who was able to navigate out of a very, very difficult situation by painting a real picture of promise and of hope. I mean, they did something in opposition. They stood up a program to take at what we call at-risk youth, people that had a kind of tough upbringing, many of whom were migrants, kind of living in council housing and stuff, and put them through a kind of Duke of Ed style program, which was a very vocational focus on building things like skills and building a sense of kind of collective responsibility and an ambition and a positive culture, having role models, all that sort of thing. and to change lives, turn people's lives around. They did that in opposition with private philanthropic capital, and then took it into government and did it in government. And leadership in politics is all about energy. It's all about foresight, and having the ability to do that, I think that sort of thing is very impressive, as it was to face many of the difficult kind of international situations he faced, particularly with the eventual collapse of Brexit, of the European Union, which sent him out before time. And I'm on the other side of that issue to him. But that said, I think he did everything he could, and he had a very honourable legacy and political success. Navigated his way out of a minority government coalition situation, which he did by winning the confidence of people that he could govern alone and do a better job than the other side, which he ended up doing. So that was very impressive.
And to stay on the theme of British politics, there have been rumours going around of Boris Johnson returning to lead the Tories.
As if
nothing would surprise me. Nothing would surprise me at this point. And as he's kind of very entertaining television presence. I don't know. I mean,
I think they're a lot of
the UK Conservatives have got a long
when
way
were
back
they
from
established? The Conservatives.
The Conservatives. So I mean, the evolution of political parties in the United Kingdom is a bit different to here.
Yeah.
In that they weren't formal bodies.
Yeah.
And there's really interesting academic disputation over. So originally the divide was between Whigs and Tories.
Yeah.
Conservatives are now called Tories, but Tory doesn't mean conservative.
Yeah.
Conservative is the modern political brand name for the Tory movement, which was a conservative movement. It was a conservative movement. And famous Tories, people like the Duke of Wellington. So those evolutions are a bit more complex because basically they were kind of collectivizations of people who self-identified in one way in the House of Commons. And originally those were slurs, Whig and Tory. Originally they were kind of negative epithets, not positive ones, and then they were adopted by those movements in the way that many kind of abuses sort of are. But they, as far as I know, the modern political brand came into being to sort of the end of the 19th century. And the rise of the kind of their version of the Liberal Party and the Labor Party happened around that time or a bit before that. I'm not sure of the exact dates, but that's roughly when it was. But they inherited a legacy that was much more significant and much more longer in the tooth than just the brand names.
Yeah.
And the legacy that the Liberal Party in Australia has is a blend of the two of them. It's a blend of Toryism. It's a blend of some of the best Whiggish traditions. As Robert Menzies said, the Liberal Party is a progressive party, which you have to do to face the fundamental challenges of a changing and modernising world.
If you don't change with the times, you become obsolete.
Rightly so.
Yeah.
And rightly so.
All right, we'll move on to the next one. What do you, and I'll open this one to you, Georges, as well. What do you think has been the greatest political mistake in the past couple of decades?
I'd say Tony Abbott's budget. For the Liberal Party, Tony Abbott's budget, the first one.
You can go worldwide for this answer as well.
I'll need time
The
to
horror
think.
budget, the 2014 horror budget.
The cigar budget.
Yes. Not a good
For the Liberal Party, I reckon that's
I'm going to go with Howard not handing over to Costello before 2004.
I'd say same fate. Kevin was too good.
You look at polls relating to economic management going in 2007. Costello and the Liberal Party were winning that. 2-1, 3-1 even. Whereas you look at preferred prime minister, Howard was losing that, even though never does a sitting prime minister lose that poll generally.
Yeah.
And when he beat Keating was beating him 2-1 in preferred prime minister. So I just think Costello, I think it was his time. He should have given up the reins. And,
no, that's fair.
the Lazarus had risen and he'd served out his time.
Yeah, I'd say something we've learned over the last. I think a popular leader is better than any policy you can have. I reckon that's my opinion.
And an unpopular leader is worse than any bad policy you can have.
Yeah.
And that's actually for, I think, a good reason, which is that people know that when they go into the ballot box, they're not actually voting on a kind of prescriptive set of policies set out in a manifesto. I mean, in some senses they are, but in some senses they know that what they're really voting for is values, beliefs, character, genuineness, trust.
And the person representing your country.
Yep. The person who embodies the spirit and the soul of the nation, who is its leading light through whatever uncertain difficulties events may throw up in the next 3 years, which you can never predict at any particular point in time. And those characteristics and the character and I think in particular the temperament of the sort of leader that people want to have is understandably further at the front of their mind than maybe any particular policy. That said, elections are an exercise of 18 million people independently making up their own minds, and to ascribe a particular pattern of decision-making to every single voter collectively is not quite right.
I think you're allowed to make generalisations.
You can.
People don't like to do it, but I like
and they're
to.
short-sighted.
Yeah.
You can say anything you want. It's a free country.
All right, moving on. Our next question from Tom Rush. What impact does Patrick think AI will have on politics? Will or should the government ever be run by AI?
I just think we'll be one of the last professions to go. One of the last professions to go. I think, so there's two parts to that question, which is that what impact will have on politics? So on the exercise of debate about who should govern and what laws should be passed. And will AI run the government? I'll deal with the first one, which is that, again, people are looking for trust. They're looking for character. They're looking for, I think, a human touch in their leader. I don't think we would ever be in this sort of, a Brave New World style situation with artificial intelligence running sort of central planning, and we move around either as mindless, half-formed automatons, or just enjoying all the pleasurable things in life without any vision for constructive progress. I think the energies of humanity will always be dedicated towards experimenting in all sorts of dangerous ways with what we should do and where we should go. And I think that excites people in a way that is going to be very, very
pushing
hard
the envelope
to suppress. That's right. In terms of government, I suspect that there probably will be the use of AI in a lot of administrative decision making in not too distant future.
Do you reckon actual decision making?
Well, I mean administrative decision making. I mean,
administrative. Yeah,
very basic things like permit applications and all sorts of other very, very routine administrative decision making that happens at all levels of government. It actually takes up a lot of money and resources.
Well, it's starting to do the Macca's the Hungry Jack's drive through with AI, which is pretty cool.
Yep. So why not environmental permits? What could possibly go wrong? On off visas, nothing could ever go wrong with that.
Yeah.
So
George, do you think this is a good advancement, or it's going to leave people without jobs?
I don't like it because that's like.
So you're a Luddite.
You're
a Luddite.
What's a Luddite?
It comes from I forget his first name, but someone Ludd. During the Industrial Revolution, he was campaigning against all this because it was going to remove away jobs.
Yeah,
and his supporters.
I just think it's like entry level jobs. I reckon it's a backbone of our society, like supermarkets, Macca's. You gotta get the work ethic instilled in people. Otherwise, you end up like me. So,
but George, what if everyone could just be a consultant?
Consultants are also...
Yeah, we could all just consult each other forever.
Consultants are like worse than the government when it comes to productivity and efficiency.
I think, look, AI is going to play such an important role. I mean, look at the role computing has played.
I reckon it'll be bigger than computers in terms of shock to the society.
The question is, where are we going to get the energy? We're not going to be able to get it purely from
maybe
solar.
future jobs would be, doing the old running on the treadmill to generate the... that could be a future job.
Some sort of soil and green situation. Yeah, like the Matrix. Yeah.
Do you think it's a necessary path for us to potentially loosen up some climate regulations in order to just get the volume of energy we're going to require?
There's only one law that really prevents a whole class of energy production in Australia, and that's the prohibition on nuclear energy generation. So you should probably look at that first.
Yeah, I think not having nuclear, we're at a massive competitive disadvantage when it comes to AI,
hugely,
data centers and all that.
Absolutely, we are. But you can also, and this is a very interesting thing, you can also solve this problem with cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
So if you set up Bitcoin mining rigs in places with very cheap power elsewhere in the world, you can buy the Bitcoin, or you mine the Bitcoin very cheaply, resell it for a higher price, then use that to buy the power back at home.
Yeah, wow.
So, yeah.
Wow.
All we'd have to do is just go into the Arctic or something.
Crypto is very bad.
Set up solar panels forever. So basically, it just replaces cabling. Yeah. So instead of having to transmit the power by cables, so instead of having to lay an undersea cable to Antarctica and have solar panels set up there for 6 months in summer or something, that would obviously violate about 7 million treaties. But hypothetically speaking, you could do it, George. I mean, this could be your job in the future. You just sit there going, it's a good deal. Buy those Bitcoins.
Arbitrage it.
Yeah, buy some Ethereum. Literally, you could bet the entire national wealth on Trump coin.
Yeah, maybe when I'm Prime Minister, I'll do that as sovereign wealth fund will be based off.
Yeah, well, you could take over and you could chair the future fund.
Yeah, I'd like that.
That's all. You want to do that forever?
Yeah. Next question, Leon Parax. What's the price of a dozen of eggs?
It's about $9.
It's $6.60 at Coles.
Depends what eggs,
for $6.60 at Coles for a dozen.
Cheap.
Yeah, I just
Not for a
fact-checked it.
dozen.
I just fact checked.
Not for a dozen.
Those chickens have never seen
Peter
sunlight.
doesn't make the same mistake. That was half a
Those
dozen.
chickens have never seen sunlight. Wow. Free range eggs. For
No,
$6.60.
Josh's rainbow
All the way down
eggs.
to $5.90.
What's Josh's rainbow eggs? That's a real. But yeah, mind you, the
extraordinary
poultry industry's had a massive shock with this bird flu, the avian flu, or whatever
Yeah,
it is.
that's right.
So Josh's rainbow eggs, 12 pack,
Yeah,
$10.50.
$10.
I think those might be the ones that I'm about somewhere in between.
He's raking it in.
Yeah, I like a big egg. I think if you want to buy an egg, you may as well get a big one.
Oh, look at this. The 18 pack is only $11.90. It's $1.40 for 6 more eggs.
They're small though. I've tried them before.
Are they?
See, they're only 100 grams more. Look, it's a rort.
Yeah, good point.
So you may as well.
And it's more expensive per 100 grams.
And then you're basically paying for shell. So
Yeah.
you may as well.
Just quickly on this
Just to get
on
the
this
big
topic,
top-
what are your
big
thoughts
top.
on the duopoly that exists between, with
It's a consequence of the minimum efficient scale of supplying goods to like the third most sparsely populated country in the world. So, yeah, if you want to run a set of independent regional supermarkets, you will find that you are paying a very, very vast amount to truck apples from Queensland to Victoria and not drop them off anywhere in between.
So you like the duopoly?
Consequence of the market, really. I mean, the only kind of
Not
again.
a Toscanos fan? Do you have Toscanos in your part of the world?
I actually, mate, I shop at IGA. I shop wherever. Like, I'm very kind of diverse in my shopping choices, so I'm not contributing to it personally. But I think if we were to kind of enforce a breakup or something like that, you would just end up with higher prices, right? Because absent market failure, like barriers to entry, those, and this is kind of well established, right? Like the kind of number of major competitors in the market is determined by the minimum efficient scale, which in Australia happens to be very large.
Yeah. Me personally, when I'm buying the deli cold meats, I would crawl through broken glass just to go to Toscanos.
They're good there, are they?
Yeah,
What do you get?
I get
Just salumi,
ham, salami, prosciutto,
mortadella,
mortadella,
bit of gabagool maybe.
gabagool. I'm actually rewatching The Sopranos for the 10th time probably.
I thought it was 8th time last night.
Yeah, I've seen it a lot.
I've never seen it. I should try.
Oh, you
Should look
should.
into it.
So
I can't imagine you'll ever find enough time to watch a whole series. But if you,
I'm lucky if I get through like one or two documentaries a week.
maybe
It's
take
fun,
a
really.
gap year next year. When your presidency's done, take a gap year.
Mate, you will never see me again after this. No, I'm going on a short holiday soon. So that'll be
Oh,
fun.
yeah. You can watch it on the plane,
I can.
Sopranos.
No, I'm going to Duolingo. I try to do that on the plane.
What language are you learning?
Italian. Well, I already speak a bit of Italian, so
Oh, yeah?
yeah. So
Is
I
that
can
what you
kind of-
learnt
and
in school?
I speak adjacent related languages, so I can like.
Yeah.
I
Is that
can
what you
kind
did
of-
in VCE?
I did that in primary school.
Primary school, yeah.
Yeah. So it's still there. Like the basic grammatical structure is there.
Yeah.
I just need words. Like I just like if I have words, if you tell me a word for something, I can like string it all together. Like I don't need to learn the grammar or the endings
Yeah.
or anything like
When
that.
I used to
So,
do Duolingo,
just
I was
vocab.
doing Italian as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. A lot of them European countries, such niche languages that no one else uses. I don't know why we bother.
Yeah. Well, if you that's a market that's open for a bit of consolidation, I think. That's ripe for a few mergers and acquisitions.
Like I'm Maltese and Malta has its own language and it's like a tiny island the size of Phillip Island.
And it's a variant of Italian. Or
It's like it's a bit of Arabic, a bit of Italian. It's like you won't be able to
it's an argot.
like say Arabic or Italian, you won't be able to understand Malta. It's just literally its own thing.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Bit of Latin.
I've never heard it
Yeah.
spoken, so
Yeah.
that's interesting.
all right, Patrick, what's the one big thing no one's talking about?
The one big thing that no one's talking about is it's the productivity crisis. Lucky. No, it's probably the collapse of the Chinese real estate market, but I think people are talking about that now.
Yeah,
That's going to destroy the Australian steel industry. But no, seriously, like,
My one would be speed limits.
yep, I think there is a lot of merit in that. What do you think the speed limit should be, Georges?
I'd like an autobahn in Australia, like Melbourne to Warrnambool.
What are we talking? Unlimited?
Yeah, unlimited.
Not very nanny state of you.
No, I'm not.
Not very nanny state of you at all.
I'm a liberal.
The fatality statistics or the kind of the safety record of the autobahn is quite good, I believe. Because people pay attention.
Yeah.
You would if you were
Yeah.
doing 220.
Yeah.
You would pay attention.
Yeah.
But no, seriously, like I think it is a strange thing that in a country that is so large, so much road transport required, we have some of the lowest speed limits in the world.
Yeah.
And like
30 in some areas, I don't see.
The 30 thing is insane.
Yeah,
Either ban cars or let them do 40.
Yeah.
Like really.
Yeah, no, I'd rather just make it a bike lane, a whole street of bike lane than make it 30.
I think I'm actually a very balanced user of like all forms of transport.
Yeah.
I ride my bike to work.
Yeah.
I take public transport into, the city and to all sorts of things.
Yeah.
I drive to uni. Like I use it all. I use it all.
I reckon if we had
the one
better
that
PT,
the one that is more regulated than all the others is driving your car.
Yeah. And understandably, it's giving people a lot of power.
Yes, it is. It is. So I'm big on people being able to get to where they want to go.
Yeah.
With the maximum variety of choice and speed.
Yeah.
You should be able to get where you're going quickly and in a manner that you choose. That should be the goal of any transport system.
You're very pro e-scooter.
Yeah, I'm extremely pro e-scooter.
Yeah.
They should be regulated. They shouldn't be ridden on footpaths.
In Europe, that was so good. The e-scooters.
Yeah, phenomenally done in some cities.
I find it's like the best way to see a city. Just on the e-scooter.
Yeah, no, yeah, 100%. I agree.
Freedom.
Yep.
Yeah.
We did the.
I reckon we should have like designated zones to park them.
The parking zones actually work pretty well.
Yeah.
I was in Tel Aviv last year, and they're probably on every sort of second block or something.
Yeah, it's pretty much
so
where
you might have to walk around the corner to
it's
get
usually
back to
where
your hotel,
every
but it's
bike
fine.
stand is. Where every bike stand is, there'll be like a.
No, Georges, we can't be open minded about these things in Australia. Just ban.
Yeah, no.
When you're in doubt about anything, ban. It's very bad, and what people don't realise is that it's keeping people off the roads. It's also a massive transport revolution for children. And obviously like 12-year-olds, but I think you were allowed to ride them if you were 14 or 16 or something.
Sounds right.
Yeah.
Kids were riding them to and from after school sport. I mean, it was really, really freeing.
I
mean, I'm currently in the only local government area in Victoria where you're still allowed to rent them. You can buy one and own it and ride it anywhere, but it's not the same thing. And it's actually more flexible to pay as you go with them.
Is that Port Phillip?
That's right. It's more flexible to pay as you go with them.
Yeah.
Because
not the passes.
Yeah, because if you own one, first you got to worry about locking it up.
Yeah.
You got to worry about it being stolen.
Yeah.
You got to charge it. But if you just walk out of your front door, walk down the street, tap it and go with one, you can leave it and you can take the tram home or get something else or whatever. And look, they're pretty reliable. They're very safe. They only go at 20. I mean, maybe they could be a bit quicker, but you shouldn't be allowed to ride them down the footpath. And there should be heavy penalties for that and stuff. And I would have thought there's some sort of AI system that
and
could.
no helmets because you can't have no helmets.
Yes. I think ultimately that's about protecting yourself.
Yeah.
And there's an element, there's a significant element of that. I think there should be your own personal choice, but regardless.
But it's also the taxpayers who need to pay for your bloody brain hemorrhage.
That's right. That's right. And it's everyone else's insurance premiums and the collective safety obligations are reasonable. The same reason people have to wear seatbelts in cars. So
because with the e-scooters, there is a massive spike in road trauma.
Yes,
scooter road trauma.
Yes, which is often from people being kind of drunk or using their phone. But they shouldn't do. But we do need to come to terms with the fact that every single form of transport is dangerous. They're always
not the train.
Well, until you've got to walk home at night from the train station through dimly lit streets. I mean, that's not very safe.
Yeah.
You also can't move things around on them.
Yeah.
There's lots of use cases where you can't use public transport. It's very hard to kind of move.
If we had better public transport in Melbourne, I'd use it all the time.
Yeah, me too.
Queue's such a black spot for public transport.
You're in a train desert. I'm in a train desert.
I live right next to a train station.
Yeah.
Which is life-changing, which is excellent.
Do you use it much?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah, that's so good.
Very convenient. It's literally just a 5-minute walk.
I'm actually low-key excited for the SRL.
If it's ever completed. Maybe one day. One day we'll all be able to afford one-bedroom flats.
Yeah.
Just on the 36th floor of the apartment towers we'll be building on top of them, and we will own nothing and we will be happy.
What are they called? The zones?
Value capture kind of.
No, do you know the designated zones of development where they're going to build on the train? What are they called?
I don't know.
What's the word? Don't know. Anyone?
Something ominous, no doubt.
Well, before we wrap it up, Patrick, what's next for you? What does the future for Patrick look like?
Oh, wait and see, really. Wait and see. I'm just got to get through my my corporate law exam first, really. Not corporate law, competition law.
Competition.
I don't even know what the subject's called, so I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble.
Any talk about Woolworths and Coles on that one?
A lot. Yeah, they're not happy with the big supermarkets. Not happy at all. They are in real trouble.
Yeah.
Real trouble with the academic staff at Melbourne Uni.
Yeah. No. Good.
Yes, thanks for having me. It's been great.
Thanks for coming on. Like I said, not everyone was as brave as you, so thank you.
No one was.
Thanks for coming on. It means the world, and your number one first guest.
Well, let's hope I'm outmatched by those in future.
Thank you for listening. Adios. Bye.